Okay.
Let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Tonnie. I'm currently taking a Digger Challenge class, which is a group-based course that each group working on their own design project to do some improvement for our community. And our group is trying to have the college application process with the refugee student in the international high school at Langley Park. So I just designed my personal project in the related direction that the English language program for the refugee student in the college. And I just assumed that there will be more refugee students join our UMD community in the next couple years.
Mm,
So would you mind doing a brief introduction about yourself?
sure. Yeah. So my name is Cameron Bussaca. I am a first year PhD student in the
That's
International
cool.
Education Policy Program here at
Mm-hmm.
University of Maryland. I work as a graduate assistant in the
Mm-hmm.
International Student and Scholar Services Office,
Uh-huh.
and I do international student programming for the university, including the English Conversation Partners Program.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. And I checked the website link that the Gabby sent to me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it looks like you have a like some kind of ESL program or activity on the campus.
Mm-hmm.
Can I know more detail about that?
Sure, yeah. So the name of the program used to be called the ESOL
Mm-hmm.
Conversation Program,
Mm-hmm.
which we changed to English Conversation Partners, and there's a very deliberate reason why we changed it. Particularly English speakers of other languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is, or ESL, English as a second language.
Mm-hmm.
That connotates or denotes or means different things to different people,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it has different implications. So primarily, I think what we wanted the English Conversation Partner Program to be was a program that focuses less on like specific grammar topics or on like teaching English, right? And more on providing a space to speak English.
Like
Um,
in the daily life.
exactly, right? So the English Conversation Partners Program has evolved to a degree, and it now is housed under ISSS. And it is, I would say, the focus of it is a conversational English,
Mm-hmm.
creating a space for particularly our international students, but any students,
Mm-hmm.
facilitators as well, to make new friends, right? To get to know each other. There's
Mm-hmm.
a cross cultural component because we have students from all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? So every conversation revolves around some aspect of culture or cultural perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you're talking about something like fashion, right? Every student brings their own cultural perspectives to that, and then right, it provides a space to build confidence speaking English
Yeah.
because um, it is difficult in a classroom, right, to find the opportunity to speak English with your
Mm-hmm.
classmates or with your teacher,
Yeah.
particularly about everyday life, right, versus what you find in a textbook, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also an international student. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the major student group in your program? Like, where are their country of origin?
Sure. So the primarily most of the students are from Asian countries.
Okay.
So China, I would say, is our biggest.
Mm-hmm.
We have some students from Japan, Vietnam. Um, Let me think. We end up with some students from Latin America,
Mm-hmm.
some students who are exchange students from Europe, or like PhD students who are from Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and then we do have some students who are from India as well.
Oh, okay, good. Um, so, what are the main problems do you think the international student always met, and do you think they solve them through the language courses?
Sure. Yeah. So I think some of the biggest issues that international students face is uh, all sorts of cultural difference, right? So whether or
Mm-hmm.
not that's communication culture, right? So the way that we speak to each other, the way that we motion to each other, the types of communication that we engage in.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that usually is a difficulty that I see for international students is within the classroom, right? So in more Western culture or the United States, There's an expectation that students will engage with the professor,
Yeah.
right? So ask questions, make comments, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Particularly our Asian students, I think, find that that's not the culture that they come from, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't speak to the teacher, you listen. And it's not about asking questions or those types of things.
You just keep quiet.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it feels too shy, or sometimes just we don't know what to ask.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I would say that that's one of the biggest pieces, right? Is kind of like, what are the expectations within communication? And that's outside, right? That's when you go to the grocery store or, use the metro or anything, right?
Yeah.
And then there's obviously the academic piece. So with professors, with fellow peers, right, in class. So I would say that that's the biggest barrier or difficulty, challenge rather, that international students have to pass. And the English Conversation Partners Program, I think, does two things in that vein, right? One is that it establishes more of an opportunity for students to start thinking about asking questions, about engaging, right, with material, which I think is a skill that you could bring into the classroom. Building confidence with speaking, period, right, allows you to then understand some of the different or push through some of the awkwardness sometimes of communication, right? And then I think it's the beginning of setting the foundations for what expectations are. So international students, or rather the participants in the program, are typically in a course with a facilitator who is, most of our facilitators are U.S. students or U.S. domestic community members who have been through the U.S. education system, and therefore students can ask, whatever they want, right? Like, so what was it like with your professors, or what was it like going through school, or right, asking questions about what is it like to date in the U.S., or if I wanted to get from Washington D.C. to New York City, how do I do that, right?
Yeah.
So then it's helping fill in some of what the kind of the cultural knowledge that you need in order to survive, right?
Yeah.
In a different place.
Okay, that's good. Have you ever met a student with the refugee status?
So I am. The answer is yes.
Yes.
I know that I have, and I'm sure that I've met more than I know, right? Because I know that I've met a lot of international students, and I don't always remember which ones are refugees and which ones aren't, and students don't always disclose that, right, in a conversation, right? I wouldn't just ask an international student, "Are you a refugee?" Right? But no, but I certainly have.
So, what's your personal impression about the refugees?
Sure. So I would say that my personal impression of refugees is that they are very resilient individuals. Particularly the ones that I have experience with seem to have a strong sense of responsibility and awareness, right? Like through having experienced challenge, it has caused them to reflect a lot, right? And therefore they just have more awareness about who they are, their own experience, their awareness. And I think that with that brings us a sense of responsibility towards, being a good person, being a good citizen, right?
Yeah, I've never met refugee before. I probably met today because our group went to the high school there. But I don't know who is the refugee student.
Right.
Yeah, but I heard the story of my friends, and her family was from Cambodia, and they used to, the government used to kill millions of people. It's so bad, and she came to the U.S. around the 1990s in California, and at that time she don't know English at all, and she's very poor, and she suffered the school bully, something because her classmate just laughing at her just because she only had one pair of shoes. And she said the emotional hurt is really bad. And after I heard that story, I really, for the first time, I feel so bad for the refugees, and we need to do something for them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you think that age could be a problem for people learning a second language?
So I myself learned French when I was like started maybe when I was like 13,
Mm-hmm.
and then my French is okay, and then I
Yeah.
started learning Spanish recently because my wife is Colombian,
Oh,
and so yes, I do think age is plays a factor, but what I have found is that people that speak already a second language, right, or some understanding of a second language, can learn a third language much easier. For instance, for me,
mm-hmm.
learning French was very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Learning Spanish has been so much easier because I'm less afraid to make mistakes.
Okay.
There's a part of, and I'm sure you even relate to this, right? There's a part of learning a new language where you begin to dissociate, right? What this is, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is an object, and then we can call it many different things, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's like tasso or cup or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so I think once those ideas start to happen, then you can learn languages. But I'm not like a linguistic science person, so I don't know
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think some of the refugee students came to the U.S. at a younger age,
Mm.
like your age, like 13 something. I think it's still young enough to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But like for some international students, and they also came to the U.S. at any age, but they do prepare for the basic English.
Mm.
But what if like some refugee student who have no English learning background and came to the U.S. at like 11th or 12th grade? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of old.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think coming with no language knowledge would be difficult
Yeah.
regardless of what age.
Yeah.
I think when you're younger, you've built up less like um, like knowledge that you're sure of, right? Like when you're 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
you're everything is new, right? So
Yeah.
like learning something new is very easy
Mm-hmm.
when you get a little bit older. But I think when you're in 11th or 12th grade, I think you would probably still be able to learn fairly quickly. I think anyone is capable of doing it. But I think the more difficult part of being an 11th or 12th grader is how do you keep up with your studies, right? How do you finish high school?
Mm-hmm.
How do you not feel that you're being held back, right? Because you don't know the language.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact your relationships, right? Like your the story about your friend from Cambodia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, her experience impacted the relationships that she had. So not being able to speak English, I think, would be a real challenge.
Mm-hmm. Um, um, like from my knowledge, the refugees probably usually coming from the area like Middle East, the Central America, or maybe Africa, and their first language can be like Spanish, Arabic, or something other. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like you have an education background of French. And do you think it could be easier for people whose first language are above can like they can relate it to English in the history?
What do you mean by if they can relate the language to English in history?
I mean the Spanish and um, probably not Spanish, but French or
Mm-hmm.
Germany, they kind of related to the English.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that people who speak Spanish something can learn English easier?
Okay. So interestingly enough, I think there are ways in which knowing a similar language is very helpful, in the sense that, like, you're right, there's a lot of overlap between French words and English words.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, once you understand the formula, which all of us know because I already know English, I can apply that same formula to French words, right? However, I also think it's sometimes more difficult because if you're learning something that overlaps but isn't the same, right? I think it creates like difficulty in learning versus if it's something completely new, right, with nothing similar, right? Then you're starting from scratch, and there's nothing that's going to be conflicting that knowledge.
So you mean like kind of confuse, like messy them up?
Yeah. So for me, I spoke French very well. I started learning Spanish, and now when I speak Spanish or when I speak French, I use Spanish half the time. Right? They like intertwine, and it's very difficult for me. And every once in a while in Spanish, when I'm searching for a word, I throw in a French one. Because it's just what I know.
Yeah. That's true. Um, um, from your point of view, do you think the refugee student can be taught in the same way as the other international students?
Like in classrooms? And do they speak English or no?
Let's assume they speak.
Okay. So I would say I think it depends, right? And the reason I say I think it depends, like I think if you're a brand new refugee, let's say, versus international student, as you mentioned, right, there's a degree of trauma that is associated with that. And therefore, right, there might be other things that need to come first, whether that's kind of mental health services, and those types of supports, right? Familial support, etc. But beyond that, I think absolutely, and particularly what I think is most important, which I want as somebody who's in education, particularly like focused on education and making it more international, right? And respecting the voices of international students. I think any class that relies on and utilizes the experience of international students and refugee students, right? Any of these students, all of the students, domestic included, right? That's a great classroom, right? Because then you're hearing perspectives from everyone from all around the world, and you're really valuing, right, their experience. And so I don't think there's really any difference when it comes to, what is the curriculum like, right? If there's refugee students or international students.
So the mental health is just the main purpose that I concern. Like, if there's classroom, like they have refugee students, do we need to be more sensitive about them?
Yeah. So I don't know, right? So I mean, I think that's one area where it's like there are people who study that, right? There are people who are deeply invested in the education of refugees, and the mental health of refugees. And so I think when it comes to that idea, right, that would be something that I think you would want to refer to an expert on.
Yeah. From the feedback that we previously got from the principal in the international school at Langley Park, many refugee students cannot get rid of their refugee status when they write the application essay for the college. So, if you have a group of refugee students, do you have any good idea for helping them to jump up the loop, like start writing easier?
So what do you mean, like when they write their college essay, they write "I am a refugee"?
No, like when you came up with the ideas, you always think like, "Oh, I'm a refugee. I don't know, like any other story about me." Yeah, that's could be a problem.
Sure. Right. Okay. So that they're not just a refugee, right? They're all of these other things about themselves. Yeah. I don't know, right? So, I mean, I think this is particularly where it's, it's important for people who have walked in their shoes to be able to give them some sort of guidance, right? So other refugees that have been through the process and how they found their own voice or found who they were again. For instance, I think there's lots of authors, right, who are refugees who have written books about their experience. And so that might be a good starting point, right, to help them process what their experience looks like and to help them find who they are besides just a refugee, right? Because when I think about what I wrote my college essay on, right, I wasn't thinking about that, right? Like my experience was very easy considered, right? In comparison.
I suffer a really bad when doing the refugee the application essays.
Yeah, I mean it's tough.
Yeah.
It's very, very tough. Yeah.
It's hard to come out the ideas.
Yeah.
So do you think the special program or courses should be launched for the future potential refugee students crowds, or do you think your program, your kind of like the English conversation program, can cover these issues?
So I think the English Conversation Partners Program is a great complementary tool, right? And I say complementary because I think all students should be partaking in it, right? Domestic as well, like fluently English speakers, right? Because it's a space for University of Maryland to actually engage in like cross-cultural, multicultural conversations, right? Which doesn't always happen in the classroom, right? Because the teacher speaks about X subject and then they're done, right? However, I think that more efforts need to be done, whether it's for refugee students or international students in general, right? To internationalize or change the focus or understanding of curriculum or what it means to be a UMD student. And so do I think refugee students need more classes or courses or something like that? I mean, I think they're just like normal students, right? But I would want to hear if they feel right that they need extra courses or things like that. But I don't think the English Conversation Program should be seen as an answer for anything, right? Because it's really a complementary program. The only answer that it has is to create a space for people to get to know each other, right? Have cross-cultural conversations and begin to feel more confident. But I think that there's other programs that could be put in place to also satisfy those requirements.
Okay, yeah. There is one feedback from our workshop today. The student said our groupmate they speak too fast. It's also my problem when I communicate with them. Have you ever met this kind of feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the larger issues, I think. So because of the fact, so I went and I taught English in France. Right? I've been a language learner myself, and then I've now run this program for several years. I've started programs like this at other universities, and as a result, I know how to slow down my speech. I know how to change the vocabulary that I use, so I'm like more easy to understand, right? The structure that with which I speak, the speed, the enunciation, right? So all of those things I think are tools, right, that professors and other students should learn, right, so that we can understand each other better. And sometimes the facilitators in the English Conversation Partners Program, they need to be reminded of that, right, because they get into a session and then they're like da 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 da, right? They get very quick.
That's a big problem, even for me.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's it. Do you have any question you want to ask me about?
Yeah. So what would your recommendation be for a program for refugees coming to the University of Maryland?
Like, we need to know more about that because the refugee probably have the problem with poverty. So do we have like special scholarship for them? Because during the today workshop, some students also care about the tuition, the money process. Yeah, so I'm not sure about the scholarship for the resident here because I'm an international student. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that brings me to one important point, which is I think refugees or international students or whatever should feel that they are assets to the university, right? Not financial assets, but rather cultural assets, right? Like you as a student should feel valued and valuable. And I think the refugee students should as well, right? So how does the University of Maryland say, hey, we want your experience, we want you to be here, we want you to enrich, right, our university, like through whatever you bring to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Like refugee student probably have other kind of. Yeah, the mental health is a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure do we have enough like organizations working on this area?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I'm sure that there are people that work at the counseling center who are like aware of that issue, but is it enough, right?
Yeah.
Is it sufficient?
Because we are encourage people, refugee students, to go to college and get the access of the higher level education.
Right.
Because the statistics shows only 1% over the world, the refugee student get a higher level education.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, thank you for today's
interview
and your patience. And it's great to talk with you.
Yeah, great to talk to you too.
Our program is not actually launching yet, but this is my personal project. I just came up with a couple concern and follow up with our team project, but I hope we can have more new groups in our university.
Yeah, definitely. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And please let me know, if the English Conversation Partners program can be useful in the future or how it can help.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.